Tears of the Kingdom is the biggest game of 2023. No ifs, ands, or buts. But that's not anything new. Zelda games have consistently been some of the highest rated and best selling games of the last 40 years. That's twice as long as some of you have been alive. So how has Zelda stayed relevant for so long? And will it continue to be popular? How am I supposed to know? The year is 1986. The Soviet Union has just created the map for Call of Duty Modern Warfare's All Gillied Up mission. Unintentionally, that is. A gallon of gas only costs 89 cents in the US, which will not buy you a single Pringle chip these days. Gosh dang, a man's hungry. Mad cow disease is discovered in Britain, which may explain why their cuisine is so horrible, but more importantly, Nintendo has just dropped one of the most important games in all of history. The Legend of Zelda for the NES. This game absolutely obliterated expectations for gamers all over the world. It defied everything they thought they knew about video games. You see, at this point, people were used to linear arcade experiences. The best at-home console game they had was Mario, where you ran straight forward in a line and jumped. But here came Zelda, a huge, non-linear experience that gave players the chance to explore an open world. This was unlike anything anyone had ever seen with their own eyes before. It was beyond their wildest imaginations. You didn't just walk left to right anymore. You could go any of the 4 directions on screen. What? That's 4 times as many things for me to do. The game gave you the ability to go anywhere you wanted. You could dive deep into smelly dungeons, ew, or try to solve puzzles unless you're absolutely dog water at puzzles like me. My brain cannot compute even a 10-piece puzzle in real life. I'm supposed to solve this stuff? Good thing we have video game guides. And you got to fight enemies with a sword in fast-paced combat. This game was awesome. We got iconic things like the Triforce here, which would carry through every Zelda game for the rest of the series, and it'll keep going into infinity and beyond. Everyone recognizes the Triforce. 1, 2, 3 triangles, the Triforce, the thing on the dollar, the Illuminati, it's all related to Zelda. When this game launched, everyone loved it. The game's non-linearity and emphasis on exploration was so refreshing for players that had spent so much time playing straightforward arcade games. It became an instant classic and solidified Nintendo as one of the most important companies in gaming. It grew a big fandom and spawned so many sequels and spin-offs over the years. It laid the foundation for The Legend of Zelda today. And yes, that was a John Wick reference. Look, obviously, we would not have the rest of the games I'm going to talk about today if we didn't get this one. Big thumbs up for The Legend of Zelda on the NES. Now we find ourselves in the 90s. Everyone's using blank VHS tapes to record movies they don't own off of the TV. Fashion is quite possibly at its lowest point in human history. I'm so glad I was too young for this. People got the frosty tips out there. And Nintendo is back with a vengeance after their last endeavor with Zelda. Oh, please save us. A Link to the Past was released in 1991 for the Super Nintendo, and it was a big deal for Zelda. It's going back to the roots. None of that. None of that. I'm talking the original Zelda, but more storytelling, more innovative gameplay, and the graphical fidelity increase with the SNES was phenomenal. This was a significant jump forward in the visuals of the game. The fidelity, the raw power the SNES gave the developers was clearly used to its advantage. This game looks fantastic for a 1991 title. My gosh, the colors are so vibrant and the environments are so detailed and the characters, they feel real. I feel like I'm really in Hyrule. But even more importantly than the improvement in the graphics was the deeper level of storytelling. This was an epic adventure. There's more fleshed out characters. There's more memorable places. It lives rent free in your head. As you make your way through Hyrule this time, there's a bigger plot unfolding. Yes, you're trying to save Zelda, but there's also the battle between good and evil, light and dark, as we'll see in many future Zelda games. If the first game laid the foundation, then this one is the cornerstone. You see the bar here for gameplay? It's getting raised with Link to the Past. I'm talking amazing dungeon design, several new mechanics for you to interact with the world, and great boss fights. This is the first time the Master Sword made an appearance in the series, and you know it came back again and again and again and again. It's one of the most important parts of Zelda. If you think Zelda, the Master Sword and the Triforce are two of the first things that pop in your head. Remember the freaking hook shot? You just grab stuff and pull it over, you zip around, woo! Bring it around town. And I'm not gonna let you forget the dual world mechanic where you jump back and forth between the light world and the dark world. This was so innovative and unique for games at the time. It really made Link to the Past stand out. And you know this concept came back again. As you'd expect, A Link to the Past was very well received by critics and players. This game became an instant classic for the Super Nintendo library, a game that everyone should play. And it sealed its legacy in the action-adventure space forever. But Zelda doesn't have to be tied down to any home console if Link's Awakening has anything to say about it. In 1993, this gem dropped on the original Game Boy, and people were flabbergasted, to say the least. Could The Legend of Zelda really translate well to a handheld game? Isn't it too complicated, too big for that? No. They successfully took the Zelda formula and shrunk it down to a little tiny handheld experience, and still had all the core elements and everything you'd expect from that series. Who cares about hardware limitations? You still got wonderful pixel art and expressive character designs that really helped you get sunk into the game. Despite being in this small form factor, Link's Awakening still told a compelling story. Heartfelt even. It had characters you just can't forget. All the hallmarks of a good Zelda game were found right here, right in your hands, in your pocket, on the train, on the airplane. It was a whole different experience for everyone, and they loved it. The game did really well. I mean, well enough for Nintendo to make an entire remake for the Switch. If you're gonna play this now, play the remake. It is absolutely amazing. The colors are so beautiful and the art style is so comfy, and it translated the original experience so well for a modern audience. All the modern conveniences, quality of life things are here, but you still get the original game. I'm so glad they put a lot of care and effort into this and brought an amazing game forward to a modern audience to love it all over again. This remake for the Switch proves The Legend of Zelda's ability to adapt and be resilient despite the changing atmosphere in gaming. Is the original 30 years old? Yes. Does the remake feel outdated? No. This entry is a favorite for a lot of fans of the series, and it'll always be legendary for being the game that proved Zelda could work on a handheld. All the games we've talked about so far have been great, but this is the one that changed everything. In 1998, we got Ocarina of Time, and gaming would honestly never be the same again. This is the game that brought us from 2D to 3D. Yes, there were already 3D games out at that time, but not like this. Zelda translated from a little man running up and down, left and right, to a whole world just like ours. And it worked so well. Oh my gosh, even just the opening screen, the piano playing, the horse running across, the music there was just so good. The first time I ever played this game was at my friend's house, and the second he booted up the game, I already felt nostalgic despite having never played it before. How is that possible? It's the same effect as Chrono Trigger. You see that title screen and you already know you're about to go on one of the journeys that you will remember for your entire life. This was a defining moment in gaming history. Ocarina of Time has some really beautiful and memorable locations, like Kokiri Forest and Death Mountain. Hyrule had never felt this real before. It had a great story that involved things like time travel and obviously the usual quest of trying to defeat Ganondorf and save Zelda. You had characters like Sheik, you know, the Super Smash Bros. Character. Ocarina of Time had some really interesting gameplay mechanics, some new abilities we hadn't seen before. The ocarinas, really cool. The dungeons obviously have 3 dimensions now, so there's a whole new layer of complexity to the puzzles that I still cannot solve without taking an extremely long amount of time and having to overclock my brain and also look at guides. You had the targeting system for the combat, which was really weird and unique to people at the time. The actions that were all specific to the context you were in. When Zelda stepped into the 3D world, as always, it showed off what was possible in video games. The developers are always trying to find new, fun, exciting ways for players to engage with the game. Not just look at it, right? Not just graphics. They care about the gameplay experience. And you cannot overstate the impact this game had on the industry. It was massive. This became the new standard for action-adventure games, and it set the blueprint of success for so many Zelda games to follow. Countless developers took inspiration from this game, and as a result, we got amazing games in the 2000s. But it wasn't just critical acclaim. This game sold numbers. Big. I mean, it generated fat stacks of cash for Nintendo. I'm talking 14 million copies, which makes it still the second highest selling Zelda game of all time until, you know, we get some Tears of the Kingdom sales numbers, because those are gonna absolutely blow it out of the water, I'm sure. This is the entry that absolutely propelled Zelda to the very tippity top of the gaming world. People still revere this game. There's so much nostalgia for it. There's a legendary aura about it. It's like, oh gosh, Ocarina of Time in 1998, that changed how I view the real world. After that, actual 3D started looking bad to me. Ocarina of Time shows how well Zelda adapts to different situations. The gaming industry moved to 3D, fine. We're not just gonna go to 3D, we're gonna make one of the best 3D games of its era. This is proof that no matter the technology or whatever was happening in the gaming industry at the time, Zelda could evolve into something amazing and yet still stay true to itself. Ocarina of Time gets the official seal of absolutely legendary. The GameCube was a little different than other things. It was cheaper, it had fun colors, the controller had a little nub for a stick instead of 2 actual analog sticks, and most of all it was a box. But you know what couldn't fit into a box? Wind Waker. I mean, technically, like, the disc it goes into the GameCube, which is a box, but, like, you know, it's outside the box. It's different. We had the realistic graphics in Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, right? But now we hit Wind Waker, and it is cell shaded. It's completely different in the art style. Everyone looks all cute and tiny, and it's so colorful and wonderful. And this was a little divisive when it came out. Some people weren't sure that this was the direction they wanted Zelda to go, but looking back on it now, it's very popular. The Zelda dev said, "You think you know what Zelda is? I'm about to flip the whole thing on its entire head. And, like, hopefully it's wearing a helmet so we don't get a concussion or something." Wind Waker has a very charming art style. It kind of looks like a Saturday morning cartoon or something, you know? It's just so cozy and comfy. That's what I always think of when I think of this game. Yeah, Link, and he's a little tiny boy. You know, so cute now. He's not a big old warrior. People thought this was gonna, you know, dilute the storytelling of Zelda and it's gonna change how things work. But when you get into it, it's quite deep, you know? There's a good story to be told there. The art style wasn't the only thing that changed. I mean, you get a whole boat now. You jump on that thing and sail across the whole ocean. The ocean itself became a sort of character. There's so many islands to go to and things to discover in there. You just want to explore around the whole place and find out what's to be discovered. Is there treasure? Are there sea creatures out there? You want to find out. There was an unparalleled sense of adventure here on the open sea, but Wind Waker didn't skip out on having a good story. There's themes like loss, sacrifice, destiny. You had characters like Tetra and the King of Red Lions. They're memorable. Was it what people expected from Zelda? No. But did they get something great? Of course. Every time. This game proved that Zelda didn't just have to be the traditional hero story. It could be really whatever it wants and still fit inside the Legend of Zelda franchise. Wind Waker was a big risk creatively. You know, making that much change all at once. Not only the look of the game, but the whole structure was so daring. But it paid off. Wind Waker is a good reminder that just because something isn't what you expect doesn't mean that it's gonna be bad. I'm glad the devs were willing to push the boundaries of what Zelda was and give us this experience because frankly, it has a very unique place in the series. Go play Wind Waker. I would turn the lights off if I could, but then I wouldn't be able to be seen. The reason? We're going into the dark world. Twilight Princess hits different, I'll say that. Remember that goofy, lighthearted game we just talked about? This is him now. Twilight Princess had a much darker and more mature tone than previous games in the series. Hyrule became a place of shadows, despair, and people wearing Hot Topics merchandise. You like sunshine and rainbows? You're in the wrong place, buddy. In terms of atmosphere, Twilight Princess is the Dark Souls of Zelda. And gosh dang it, that's why it's my favorite one. You just get thrown into this experience with themes like sacrifice, corruption, and the battle between light and dark. Twilight Princess forgot the cel shading of Wind Waker and went back to a more realistic art style with a lot of grit. It is visually stunning to look at, even for a GameCube Wii game, and so cinematic. The presentation adds a lot of weight and intensity to the story. It showed the series' ability to adapt its art style to encompass these vastly different tones than it had ever seen before. I think this more mature approach to the storytelling and the presentation let the game reach players on a deep emotional level that the series really hadn't hit before. You start to get introspective yourself when you explore the world as Link. I'm being intentionally vague about all these in case people haven't played them because my gosh, you need to play these games I'm talking about today. You shouldn't be surprised at this point then when I tell you that Twilight Princess was insanely successful. One of the highest selling games in the entire series, and one of the highest rated games of all time. Now that I think about it, I may have forgotten to mention that Ocarina of Time is the highest rated game of all time. Oops. Twilight Princess carved its special place in the history of The Legend of Zelda, and ensured that the series stayed relevant and extremely popular in an era where all games were trending towards a dark, brooding, and cinematic experience. This is peak. And for our last stop on this Zelda train, we arrive at Breath of the Wild. Why am I even talking about this? You have already played the game, I've already played the game. Any person that may even look and consider watching this video has played the game. Over 30 million copies sold. One of the highest rated games of all time. So insanely influential in the open world gaming space since its release. I mean, you say Zelda and this is the game people think about. It should be Twilight Princess, but this is the one they think about for sure. My friends that don't play video games played this game. Some of them bought a whole Nintendo Switch just to play this one game. It's massive. What else is massive is the open world of Breath of the Wild. The exploration was off the charts. You start the game, do the tutorial, and that's it. That is the only critical path in the whole game. If you want to just walk into the final boss and beat up Ganon right after that, you can. If you want to take 500 hours to 100% the game 3 times over, you can. There is literally no set path for you to follow. In terms of open, it's not just the world that's open, it is the entire game. The order you progress the story, open. The order you hit the dungeons, open. The physics system and mechanics of the gameplay, open. I'm not creative enough to fully push the boundaries of the abilities in this game, but holy cow, if you do a 4.3 second search on YouTube, you'll find millions of results of people just absolutely doing the wackiest, most impossible looking things in the entire world, and yet they are consistently finding new things even years later. The systems designers that worked on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are absolutely in a different league of game developer for everyone else. I bet it feels bad, maybe inspiring, to see what they're doing there as a game dev, because holy cow, I can't think of anything else that even comes close. Breath of the Wild literally redefined what it means to have exploration in a game. You can climb every mountain and swim every ocean. I would have sang that, but then I would have gotten hit with a copyright. Thank you, YouTube. The single best compliment I can give Breath of the Wild is that it heavily inspired the game design philosophy of Elden Ring, one of the greatest pieces of media to ever be produced by humans. If aliens came to Earth, that's one of the first things I'd give them. I say, here, this represents us as humans. Man, I want to play Elden Ring again. When's that DLC coming out? Now, the impact of Breath of the Wild on the gaming industry was profound, to say the least. It helped the Nintendo Switch absolutely skyrocket and now become Nintendo's most successful home console. And I think it's catching up to the DS in terms of overall sales. Don't quote me on that. This showcases the absolutely massive potential of the Zelda series. They didn't just embrace the idea of the open world. They made the best one ever until Elden Ring came out. They didn't just want to expand the idea of exploration in their games. Again, they were one of the earliest series to focus on exploration. But they didn't just bring that forward to a modern game. They took it to the absolute end in terms of what was possible in game development at that time. No one thought that gameplay systems could be so deep. It's like a massive Gary's mod. I don't know how they pulled this off and actually made it function basically bug-free in my experience. Zelda isn't just staying relevant here. It's dominating everyone else. Breath of the Wild didn't just raise the bar for Zelda, it raised the bar for every video game. It's not a top game for me. I mean, I'm not shy about being an enormous Yakuza fan, and I also like JRPGs, but I can easily recognize how good Breath of the Wild is. It's the perfect game to play while you're drinking coffee. No idea why, but it's just sound effects and the way it looks is just so great. Like I need to actually endorse this game. So to answer the original question, how has Zelda remained popular for almost 40 years? It's the series' incredible ability to balance tradition and innovation, to continuously adapt to modern game design while still staying true to its core elements. This is truly a timeless franchise that's perfect for players of all generations, from people that started with the NES all the way up to Tears of the Kingdom now at the end of the Switch. There's something for everyone there. And I have no doubt that this series will continue to deliver masterpieces time and time again for generations to come. Hey, I appreciate you watching this far. That's a long video. Make sure to subscribe. And until I see you next time, keep exploring, keep adventuring, and stay friggin' legendary.